Emily Dickinson is a very interesting person in history. She's an American poet. She was contemporary to Marx, the Civil War, and Abraham Lincoln. She lived at the same time as Abraham Lincoln. She was born when slavery still existed and died after slavery was abolished. Only a handful of her poems were published in her lifetime, and those were published by giving them titles and maybe making them rhyme, and in small newspapers and magazines, because literary magazines kind of didn't exist. She subsisted off of support from her family and inheritance, living in her parents' old house and living next to her brother. But she didn't become a popular poet until after she was dead. And a lot of her popularity is arguably due to her controversial opinions on death, but also on rumors about a life that was both completely shut in, but also somehow sexual and exploitative, having several mysterious love affairs with mysterious beings, even from the beginning. Her whole life, she wrote poems and was very witty and had this deep interpersonal life, but also a deep life where she exchanged letters with her sister-in-law, experienced some of the people of the town, but at the same time shutting out people that she found offensive, did not like or appreciate, say from the colleges whenever they would try to ask her for advice on topics. And now there are 2 movies and 2 series all about the life of Emily Dickinson. This pattern has continued. Back in the day, it's rumored that she had multiple love affairs, which was scandalous. But now the salacious rumors are about how she was probably a lesbian, and she probably was. There's a lot of evidence for that. So lesbians are super in, and that is a key factor in several of the productions of her life that go on now. But these are all factors and productions that she did not put forward, but these seem to be the strings that pull her along in the cultural consciousness. So was Emily Dickinson wrong? It's time to talk about culture! So Emily Dickinson had sent poems to editors, to poem collections, in order to have them published with other collections of poetries into newspapers and magazines. But her poetry style did not fit what was popular. She was compared to Walt Whitman as a negative by some editors that, didn't like Walt Whitman. I'm pretty sure it was Walt Whitman. I could be wrong. I'm very wrong a lot. Emily Dickinson liked Walt Whitman. I like Walt Whitman. I like that style of poetry. I like Emily Dickinson's style of poetry. But it was not what was popular at the time. It didn't exactly rhyme. It wasn't exactly collected by themes. They didn't have titles. Apparently titles was very important back then. And she was very private about her personal life. The poems didn't become popular until Mabel Todd, a woman who had an affair with Emily Dickinson's brother, went through and gave her poems titled, organized them by subject, and then put out a poetry book while talking about rumors and possible lies about Emily Dickinson's life. The poems were edited, she's were turned into he's, the name Sue was turned into different men's names in order to imply different kinds of affairs that Emily Dickinson might have had. And Emily Dickinson became a supremely popular poet. We're only finding out now, by now I mean since '96, through 3D scans of her work, of all of the changes and edits that were made. The name of her sister-in-law, Sue, was taken out of almost every poem there was, and we're just now finding out about this. Was Emily Dickinson wrong not to be all about those 3 things? Was she wrong not to have more rhyming? Was she wrong not to have titles? Was she wrong to have a private life when all of those factors are what make her so popular then to this very day? Her poetry survives most of the poetry that Americans enjoyed in that time. And Emily Dickinson was aware of this. One of the constant themes that Emily refers to is the circumference. The circumference being what is expected of her, what is normal. This circumference, this barrier that holds people into everyday life. I'm going to touch more on that later, hopefully, maybe in another video. More promises from Raymond. So I watched Wild Nights with Emily, which very much so takes the stance that Emily Dickinson was a lesbian. She did have a relationship with her sister-in-law. There is a lot of evidence for this. It is notable that historians doubt this, or older male historians doubt that Emily Dickinson was strictly a lesbian, because apparently it was a normal practice to write steamy, sexy love letters to your girlfriends back in the day. But you can kind of counter that, and maybe all of them were lesbians? Like, we have a lot of lesbians today. There's no reason to think why we wouldn't have had a lot of lesbians in 1870. Lesbian culturally was you fool around with your neighbors when your husband's gone and you write each other steamy, steamy love notes. But I don't want to come in on one side or another of this issue. Of course, that's what some scholars say in order to like push off the rumors that she definitely wasn't lesbian. The movie Wild Nights with Emily has a couple points of evidence, that being love letters to her sister-in-law, the name Sue, the name she in romantic poems, which was changed, but also the fact that Sue's daughter and Emily Dickinson's niece went around telling people after her death that she was a lesbian in a relationship with her mother, and everyone thinks that she's this boy crazy hermit for some reason.
If you go to the letters and the poems, you will hear the story of my mother and my aunt as I understood it.
The thing about this is it can be important for lesbian representation if it's true, but also if it's not true. It kind of doesn't matter if it's true or not, because Emily Dickinson was a private person. What matters to us is that now the rumor exists, and that's what's actually propelling her in the cultural zeitgeist, in the cultural knowledge. It's why she's so interesting. These rumors about her, from a strict moral standpoint, saying that, oh, the author's wishes is how the art should be expressed, we can say that no, her private life has nothing to do with how good her poetry is, because her poetry is good. If we didn't have her poetry, then we wouldn't have Hope is a Thing with Feathers, we wouldn't have poems about death, we wouldn't have this kind of open-ended, rich, double-meaning poetry with possible exchanges of words that evokes multiple thoughts. The more you think about the poems is wonderful and fantastic, and I love reading it and thinking about it until it forms a different meaning in my head. Is that good? This is good. Okay. So Wild Nights with Emily was supposed to make Emily kind of pop out of history and also dispel several rumors about how she lived. We said that already in this video. I shot this video out of order, and because I need to return these, like I've had this video in the planning all summer and I just haven't done it, and these are all due. Naturally, after becoming interested in Emily Dickinson, and with the plethora of television shows that are coming out now that people think she might have been a lesbian, there's renewed interest in her, though she's always been really popular. So I went through and tried to find the best way to read it. Naturally, because of Mary Todd's editing, like, I didn't know what I wanted to read. Like, the movie was supposed to make you interested in Emily Dickinson, and it did, but it also told me that all of her work was edited down to make it appropriate for people, and like given titles and numbers and ordered by theme, and not at all what she wanted. I didn't know what book of poetry to actually buy or see or read of it, and I got them all. So first thing, shout out to the one that I didn't read at all, Emily Dickinson's letters, which her letters are supposed to be as poetic and as nice and as interesting as her poems, but I just didn't get a chance to read it. There's Emily Dickinson scholars that say that if you're interested in her writing, don't just read her poetry, read her things, so shout out to her letters. This book was interesting because it was 3 poets, Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson, and Herman Melville, and it connected themes and the things they said, even though they're very different in what they did, and it was neat. Not the best place to go just for Emily Dickinson. This is just, I think, is this my bibliography? So this is my least favorite version. Like, it has a neat cover. It almost looks like the Doctor Who box. And it does the thing where it organizes the poems by topic, so you can read on a certain topic at a certain time, which I thought I would really dig. I thought I would like going through there, but I hated it. It just felt bad and wrong, and I don't know, and every time I see the word he, I imagine it's supposed to be a she, but I don't really know. But also, that kind of plays into everything, because with Emily Dickinson's poems, she had variables and different words that could easily be switched out, not just to change the meaning, but to make it, partially to make the meaning more specific or more vague. Everything I read from her is like, okay, is that supposed to be a he or a she? And maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. Don't know. But I just didn't like the organized, themed version of her poems. What I loved, but was terribly short, was Emily Dickinson envelope poems. This is fantastic because, if you'll see there, she wrote on scraps of envelopes these little poems to people. And it's set up to show you the piece of paper and the words, and that's her actual writing. That's a scan of her writing. But then it has, inscribed in type her writing, so you don't have to worry about trying to read cursive, because it is kind of hard to read, but easier to read once you know what the words are supposed to do. It feels very authentic and awesome, but there are not many poems in here. There are probably there's 80 pages, which means probably about 40 poems. And it was a really quick read, and I don't know how much they charge for this boy, but I'm guessing it's not going to be like the $5 that you'll want to pay for it. But it was really good if it's at your library. Emily Dickinson envelope poems. But my favorite one, oddly enough, was just the complete poems of Emily Dickinson. And this is just... It probably tells you in there what the arrangement for, but I didn't care because I wanted to read some poetry. I read. There's just the poems. There's not like footnotes or anything, but that's fine because there are variable words. But this is how I enjoyed reading Emily Dickinson poems the most, just in a block in front of me. So I highly recommend this guy. This is what I put on my Christmas list, or books to be bought for myself, so that I don't just occupy the library's copy of it forever. Yeah. Now I gotta take these back to the library. So back to the video and whatever I actually look like. And oh man, is that the frame? Is that the frame of this video? Is that how I shot? Her poems are meant to be about big ideas with circular reasoning for you to think about, because she's the kind of person that just thought about these things all the time. But then there's also poems where there's supposed to be a surprise. It's a surprise when all of a sudden the poem that seems to be very nice and straightforward turns out to be backbiting and a complex insult. It's meant to be surprised when, oh, this poem was about a snake all along. But when you title the poem The Serpent, that gives it away. You know there's going to be a serpent in there. And it also kind of kills some of the multiple meanings you can take from such a poem. But we wouldn't have those poems if they weren't ruined, if the author's wishes weren't completely ignored, if her work wasn't saved against her dying will. At the same time, what if it was just published? Sure, it was against her will to have her poems published after she died, but she tried to have her stuff published when she was alive.
I would imagine how burdensome to have to judge whose writing has merit. I mean, who can really have the final say on the worth of a thought or an idea. I would imagine that's a very difficult position for you to be in as the editor of the Atlantic Monthly.
What if poetry magazine editors and publishers didn't suck and just published it? We could still have Emily Dickinson in the form that she wants us to have it if she had just been published. Right? Howard Lovecraft would submit a story to a magazine, have it rejected, and have notes about things he should change, say, okay, thank you for the notes, and just submit the same story a little bit later, and the same editor would publish it without noticing that it's not changed. Could Emily Dickinson have done that? I don't know. Maybe she couldn't because poetry is a lot shorter than short stories. Maybe the flaws with the systems of these magazines, depending on editors, to go through and curate and decide what deserves to be published. Maybe the flaws of this system are in fact the strengths to get by them? The stupid editor might tell you no once, but it might tell you yes for the exact same thing if you say you listen to them. Of course, modern day publishing, as I know, a lot of magazines don't like the same thing submitted multiple times and don't give you feedback, which maybe the editors aren't so stupid now. Emily Dickinson is published now. The world of publishing is different. Editors function differently than they used to, but they still go off preference, like a Discord or Reddit moderator that has certain people and certain things they like, and then they ban other things, even though it clearly could go onto the Reddit, but they have a sub-forum that says different rules that they could throw it out for a reason. Man, I hate Reddit. And I think that these questions are particularly relevant today when everyone is a brand. Social media trains us to be brands, to perform in certain ways in order to get likes. The things that are most popular on Reddit are easy, short ideas that either make people mad or make people laugh, which is why kittens are so popular everywhere, but also why long, nuanced takes don't do so well on Reddit. If it's not a YouTube video talking about how Christopher Nolan is a genius, the video essay subreddit doesn't take it because they want no faces and they want to talk about movies, when that is not what an essay is, or a video is, or what a video essay necessarily has to be. But we see this everywhere. You do it, I did it, you do it, do it, I did it for the Vine. That we perform, we put jokes out there on Twitter. Trolls take positions that they don't believe just to make people mad. People are at the same time their least authentic selves and the most popular version that they could possibly muster on purpose. But also, they have arrived to that because of the systems that our social media uses. They've arrived at their conclusion, particularly authentically. They've authentically found a fake persona of which to take in the media. Every political argument, the people that argue about politics the most are ones that listened to certain talking heads and then they'll repeat those arguments. So much so if you try to engage with someone, it kind of doesn't matter what you say because they have a set follow-up already. They have a script that they were following instead of talking to you. I've noticed this for years, but it's come out recently with people like Tim Pool and Alex Jones and Fox News, white supremacist Carlson, where the things that they talk about find their ways into culture. Even people that don't watch Tim Jones or Fox News repeat arguments that originated from there and are popularized by them because of how we interact with people and on social media. We are all fake on social media, but we are also who we pretend to be, thus making our authentic selves real. It's hard to ever have an authentic self separate from what is on social media if we are always performing. We don't have that private life that Emily Dickinson had and enjoyed. Maybe, we assume, we don't know for sure. I don't know if Logan Paul is having any fun. Donald Trump was the president. He ran for re-election to keep being the president, but at the same time, he hates it. He didn't do the job of being president. He golfed more than any other president. Most of the day, he just watched TV. He didn't like to read long memos that didn't use his name. We know all this stuff for a fact from leaks. And if they don't destroy all the documents from the White House, they'll be archived in history that everything that went to Donald Trump's desk had to do a couple things to make Donald Trump pay attention to them. Because Donald Trump hates it, and hates himself, and probably hates his father, and probably the most fun he had was when he gave a medal to a dog and pardoned a turkey, you can tell the man is having fun at that time. And he's funny about it, but he doesn't want to be president. He just doesn't want to lose, and he doesn't want to look weak, but he isn't having any fun. He does things that you would assume are fun, but in like the least fun, least culturally relevant, least intellectually honest way. He's a fake man from the 80s. A sellout bad guy. Like even more news points out. Man. Shut up, Ray. Shut up. Holy crap. Why did I do this? Why did I I don't want to talk about Donald Trump. One of the reasons why I made this video is because I was scrolling through my YouTube thing and there was only a bunch of videos about Donald Trump and there was nothing fun and I hated it. And I liked reading poetry and I wanted to talk about Emily Dickinson and whether or not we have authentic selves or can sell out anymore or should, or if there's answers to that in order to be accepted and to have life and to be successful. But I didn't want to talk about Donald Trump because I hated it. I looked through my YouTube videos and I hate them. I hate this. TikTok seems like a lot of people having a lot of fun, but it's a lot of people doing the same thing. And I don't know if it is fun or not. You don't know because fun isn't the only factor for why people do things. Intellectual honesty is not the only factor to why we even make these videos, to why people put things on social media, because people do it for likes and retweets and comments, and if they have enough clout through likes, they can then monetize it so that they don't have to work a shitty job somewhere. Like, I don't want to work a shitty job somewhere. Like, none of us do. Like, we'd all like to have better jobs and hang out with our friends, but we're stuck inside doing side hustles all the time, and we're selling out. We are, to the fullest extent that people in the 90s said, selling out, only we don't even feel it. It doesn't feel like we're selling out when we do stuff to be popular, because that feeling of likes and adoration and attention has gotten in the way of fun. Like, it obscures fun, where at a certain point, oh, this hobby that I was doing and then monetized, I don't know if I have any fun anymore. Do I have fun? I do this all the time, every week. Am I being a better person? Am I being a better person? Am I having a more fulfilling life? We don't know. And I don't know, because we've put a market on the social. When you publish poetry, there's a market. People pay you and people buy the magazine, used to buy the magazines, and books. And that's good, because people should be paid for the work that they do. Only now there's so many poets. There's Instagram poets that put out their poetry for free. They probably have books, they probably do sponsorships. But that's what they have to do in order to live. What does it matter to have an authentic self if you can't live? Emily Dickinson had the luxury of being able to depend on family. She had a community. She had friends. She had wild nights. She probably had sex and enjoyed it. And then she wrote her poetry all the time on whatever scraps. It was probably hard and she was frustrated that people didn't read it, but she liked reading poetry. She liked reading contemporary poetry, and she wanted to be a part of that. And she wasn't until her death. Would Emily Dickinson be on TikTok, putting up 4 different versions of the same poem? Would she have any fun with it? Would she add titles to her TikToks? Because I don't think TikToks have titles that you can search for. You just go to a person and they say a neat thing. Right? I could get on TikTok. Is it fun? Should I join TikTok? I don't know. And apparently there's a lot of young people that don't like older people on TikTok. I ain't young. Should I be there? Is it a hostile space? Is it authentically for people that started it in their tweens? Does the question of should we sell out even mean anything anymore? Because I like making videos. I like it when people watch my videos. I like getting people's thoughts on videos. I like being able to put things out there on the internet and sharing stuff. I made a game that I love that people play, and the first 2 chapters are free, and I'm working on getting the second chapter out, and it's very exciting, and I'm having fun making it and writing it and collaborating, but sometimes it's not fun. And I don't know if I should quit, or I don't know if I should make it as complicated as I want in order for people to like it. And it's romance media. And I'm looking at this romance media, and like a lot of the romance media in this medium have nudity. Do I want to put nudity? Will I be able to reach an audience without nudity? At what point is not doing the things that I don't want to do hurting me and stopping me from being successful or having more fun. Because I'm sure this would be a lot more fun with a lot more people, but I'm sure also it could be a lot less fun in a lot of other ways. Even with the small amount of harassment I've gotten, I found it annoying to petty. But even an annoying, petty, stupid argument that I get on this video takes up too much of my brain space. How wrong was Emily Dickinson? And obviously I'm not taking the social media, computers, cell phones are bad, because I don't think that. I participate in it. I like it. I like talking to people online and wish I was better at keeping track of people and remembering names and being able to have prolonged conversations. I want to be able to convince people, to share my logic with them without them diving into some spiral that they learned from a talking head on the internet. I want them to know me as a person, as authentic, that cares about people. Not just to have fun, but also to be able to share my thoughts. I want to be able to share my thoughts about capitalism, and I want that to be genuine. I want people to know the goals of society should be to help people, to make them feel better, to meet their needs. And in capitalism, that is a side effect. The goal of any corporation is to make money, not meet people's needs. You can say they make money by meeting people's needs, but not necessarily. As I talk about in my YouTube Music Sucks video, the goal of making more money has made a sucky, bad product that doesn't help people or meet their needs. It's a byproduct. Having the things we want in our society be a byproduct hurts us. Like it hurt Emily Dickinson. She had her financial needs met. She had a home, she had food, she had friends. But there's more needs for an artist. They need to be able to share stuff. And right now, with our social media, with our YouTube, with our DeviantArt, with our Twitter, it's the easiest stuff to like that gets likes. It's not complicated stuff. Emily Dickinson's poetry might not actually work in today's media. Because it is complex, and you do have to think about it, and it isn't just a short, God loves you, or look at this kitten. But it's not the fault of Emily Dickinson, or the thoughts, or the poetry, or even, I would say, the social media themselves. Because the social media depends on a market. They've become a market themselves, where time is the currency. So as quickly as an idea can come to a person, the better. The easier, the more popular the idea. Of course, there's wrinkles in that. As we know on YouTube, videos don't do well if they're 2 or 3 minutes long, unless you're pro ZD and hilarious. Writing is a profession that for the majority of history was just a hobby. You could not monetize writing. It was a side hustle. Up into, say, this century, actually. F. Scott Fitzgerald was one of the first people that really made a living just writing novels and stuff. Everyone else had to have other jobs, and he was actually among the first to become actually rich doing it. He was fairly rich, maybe because his wife was like an heiress, so he had to make a lot of money to make her happy. Maybe because he was just that commercially successful at the time. But if you look back at a person like Howard Lovecraft, sad and racist as he was a frail, disabled individual. All he could do was write. So he depended a lot on other people, but he was just a writer. But his needs were mostly met by his working wife and whatever inheritance he had. Artists for most of history have needed patrons, and most of the time it was wealthy patrons because they were wealthy. So the art that was made was for a specific audience. Selling out meant that you worked for Lord Byron and you taught his children how to play the piano. There are gestures, which are the poet, clown, comedians, that only existed because they were paid by wealthy people and lords in order to perfect their art and were considered very lowly. William Shakespeare was a playwright, but also one of the players, and had his life mostly subsisted off putting out these plays that specifically aimed at the widest audience possible, where there would be fart jokes and crassness and sex and salacious stuff in these plays, where then he would put big ideas and he talked about the human condition and kind of hated women. And part of me asking if Emily Dickinson was wrong, how wrong was Emily Dickinson, is how wrong are we? What is so wrong about everything around us that we all sell out on instinct? That parts of us are changed even not consciously, but just for the process of participating, parts of us are changed and rewarded, and so we give in to those parts more and more. I'm shooting this video in December 2020, in the middle of a pandemic that has not been dealt with. Everyone is doing a side hustle. Everyone is online because they don't have social activities anymore. They can't go to restaurants. A lot of people don't have jobs that pay them well. And before this even started, we were already underemployed. We were already evicting a lot of people. We already had several market bubbles in the auto loans and the housing loan industry waiting to pop again. And another big bubble that's probably coming with internet advertising that's gonna blow all of this to shit as well. Something isn't right in how we interact with one another and how we make art and how we communicate. Something wasn't right in Emily Dickinson's time, or Edgar Allan Poe's time, or F. Scott Fitzgerald's time, or Howard Lovecraft's time. And Emily Dickinson was aware of this. She knew she was more private than people wanted her to be. She knew people liked titles. She knew people liked more rhyming. She knew people liked happy poems. And she didn't hate happy poems, but she thought there was more to it. There's this idea of the circumference. There's these things that society expects of us, that we as a collective expect of each other. And that's through systems like being a neighbor, having a job, having a boss, paying rent, what kind of clothes we wear, what is acceptable, what is in fashion, the things that we do that signify to one another where we belong or when we don't belong. And the idea of the circumference is not that it's something that needs to be changed or ignored or fought, but just something that is, that we all feel, that we are aware of instinctively, collectively. People's beliefs are shaped by their material conditions, how wealthy they are, how many of their needs are met, how much free time they have, and what benefits them into having fun in that free time. What socially the people around them also believe. It's in people's best interest to believe in the thing that benefits them. If you're a streamer like Destiny, it's in your best interest to argue with people. He gets attention and money and renown, so he always will find an argument with someone, or always will try to be. If not consciously, then he'll be rewarded for when it does happen, and thus it will happen more. Emily Dickinson was born in a time of slavery and lived through the Civil War. Emily Dickinson didn't believe in slavery, but it was a topic that people talked about. Matt Christman in his Kush vlogs talks about slavery and the different people that were against it. There were regular abolitionists against it. Intellectually, they thought it was morally wrong. But a lot of unions were only against it. And by unions, I mean workers at the time, were only against it when they directly had to compete with slavery. They didn't back slavery abolition because it wasn't right or immoral, but because it wasn't good for their business. Which isn't a negative on them. At the same time, the South benefited from slavery, so much so that in the Reconstruction, because of the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and Republicans that did not believe in the cause, slavery was still the system in the Reconstruction. Black people, though now free, did not have the means in which to live freely or to do what they want, and still, generations had to work in fields, indentured servants again. Slavery was still kind of the norm because it existed and it benefited people. If something exists and already benefits you, there's no reason to change it because it hurts someone else that you're not familiar with. If you feel one way or another about social media or capitalism or selling out, This video likely will not convince you of one way or another, because this video is media. This video might not even be as impactful as a poem, because this video will not change materially what is around you. I can't make you see the things that make you believe what you believe. Obamacare was a key turning point for several people who were Republicans because it saved their lives. People who found out they had cancer, but they had a small business, could not then switch their insurance or buy insurance before Obamacare because it was a pre-existing condition. They could not up their insurance in order to buy something that would help them with their cancer, so they would die because we've marketized our healthcare system. Once it was illegal not to insure someone because of a pre-existing condition like cancer, people were able to get other and better insurance and were then able to pay for their cancer treatments and are alive today and may believe in democratic things today because it saved their lives. But before then, they were a small business owning, any money my employees makes belongs to me, Republican. Only a small amount of people will believe things before they have to, before they see the evidence of it, the benefits for it, before it actually benefits them. I have a Patreon. It benefits me to have as many people as possible give it money. The problem is that no one has a job right now, and everyone's on the internet begging for attention one way or another. I would like your attention. Put a like on this video, maybe a comment, tell me about your favorite Emily Dickinson poem, tell me what selling out means to you, if she was wrong for not making her poetry and her personal life more available to the public, and maybe check out my Patreon and follow it, have a good time. I love you very much, and thanks for listening to me talk about culture and poetry for so very long. Fun, fun, fun.
I will come back again sometime.
Say in a long time, that is nearer. Sometime is no time.